also around that same time started working at the Dutch central bank,
Mm-hmm.
which is the reason for Mira or the reason for my anonymity in general. Because
Mm-hmm.
as you can imagine, a central bank is not super fond of one of their employees, being on Twitter going, central banks are not the future. Central banks have all these flaws.
Of
Crypto is
course.
the future. So I decided to keep those worlds kind of separate.
This podcast is sponsored by Coin ATM Radar. When buying crypto with cash, an ATM is much more reliable and safer than meeting some random person in a random place. And unlike an exchange, which could freeze your account, you truly own all the crypto you buy. With Coin ATM Radar, you could find crypto ATMs and other services where you can buy and sell cryptocurrencies for cash. On their website, you can search by coin, address, if the ATM supports selling as well as buying, and you can also search by geo area, country, state, city. You can also check and compare actual current fees at different ATMs. If you want to find out more, head over to coinatmradar.com, which is coinatmradar.com. So, hey everyone, I have the fantastic pleasure of speaking with who I thought was the one and only Mira Hurley. How's it going?
Hi, yeah, nice to meet you as Milan instead of Mira.
Yes. So why don't
Yeah,
you properly introduce yourself and say who you actually are, and then we'll kind of get
right.
into
So
everything.
yeah. So I am Milan, Milan de Reede. Dutch people will know how to pronounce it. Others will have to spell it out for themselves. But yeah, I'm Milan, not Mira. I am from the Netherlands. I'm not currently in the Netherlands, but yeah, I am not actually female. Had a bit of a gender identity crisis for a few days there because many
Mm-hmm.
people wanted me to stay Mira Hurley, and they were disappointed they couldn't date Mira Hurley. But
Hmm.
yeah, I'm I'm out of the
Yeah.
closet now as Milan.
Yeah. So I'll just give the background of where I came across you over the years. So obviously I've been in crypto for a very long time, and um, in the digital cash space more specifically. And of course, I come across people from the nano community a lot. And I always, in the early days, I might have had a little bit of friction with the nano community because there was a lot of very kind of aggressive promoting people. But over the years, it's become a lot better. And I kind of, some of my initial like criticisms and things like that of nano, I've kind of grown to accept as an alternative way of doing things that's actually pretty smart. And but over the years, I've always noticed this Mira Hurley person who's always been had like a relatively high number of followers and reach and things like that. And also being much more like, I guess, reasonable and articulate and educated on these things than most accounts that are just like, no fees, bah. And so, and by the way, from basically day one, because AI generation of images has changed a lot over the years,
Yeah,
and the early fake Mira Hurley picture was pretty good, but it's still, I could tell that wasn't a real person. It just
yeah,
looked too much like a composite of a few faces, and so I was like, okay, well, this is probably just someone trying to hide their identity. I thought it was still probably a woman trying to hide their identity, but I didn't, so it happens. And by the way, you are in good company because one of the very most important people in the crypto space today, JP, who founded Thorchain, for the first is Thorchain Satoshi. He was sort of he was anonymous for at least 4 years, and he
mm.
went by the name of Lena, also a female pseudonym person. That then he killed Lena at one point and just came out as a real person. So
That is quite funny.
yeah, so that's that whole thing. So um, now that we realize that there's a real, I mean, there's always going to be a real human being, but now that the real human being behind Mira is out, why don't you explain a little bit about yourself and how you got into crypto, and then I guess more nano specifically after that.
Cool. Yeah, that would also help explain Mira, I think. So that's helpful. So I first got into crypto like 2012, 13, which back
Mm-hmm.
then like wasn't crypto. It was just
Yeah.
Bitcoin pretty much. But mostly just got into it for like fun. We were sending it around with friends. I played this online game, and we would just send it to each other a bit. Like wasn't really too deeply into it. Wasn't like a hardcore. Okay, this is the
Mm-hmm.
libertarian ideal, gonna change the world. Um, and was into it for a few years. Then around 16, 17, got a bit disillusioned with the block
Mm-hmm.
size wars because I saw the arguments for both sides and wasn't really convinced by either. It sort of
Mm-hmm.
just made me grow like suspicious of both sides. Like, okay, yeah, this is a risk. So that was not a good time. And then around 2018, found out about Ray blocks, nowadays called
Mm-hmm.
Nano. Also about IOTA, which I was quite enthusiastic about, but nowadays I'm not so much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Also around that same time started working at the Dutch central bank,
Mm-hmm.
which is the reason for Mira or the reason for my anonymity in general. Because
Mm-hmm.
as you can imagine, a central bank is not super fond of one of their employees, being on Twitter going, "Central banks are not the future. Central banks have all these flaws.
Of
Crypto is
course.
the future." So I decided to keep those worlds kind of separate, and started with Mira on Reddit. I had a different pseudonym and just to keep the two worlds separate. Turned out to be a really good choice because, like 2 years in or 3 years in, around 2021, someone actually dug deep enough into Mira to figure out my real name, Milan, and my employer, and reached out to the Dutch central bank and like had a collection of my posts with like timestamps of Dutch working hours, and like showing the ones that were most anti-central bank and most sort of incendiary to the central bank, whatever. So, and also some people that sent like death threats with like my address in there and whatever.
Wow.
So I was happy I went anonymous. Um,
For all
what?
those
Sorry?
years. Yeah, for those
Yeah.
years. So first of all, what who were, generally speaking, if you can even know, who were these people, and why are they so upset at you in particular that they would go to all these lengths to kind of attack you?
Yeah, so for one of them, at least I know definitely was a Bitcoin maximalist because the thread also said like stop fudding Bitcoin or something to that effect. And like reaching out to my employer was just after I'd written and posted this like big thread. Like if you follow
Mm-hmm.
me, you'll know I do these like way too long threads. And I did one that laid out like why Bitcoin will have issues
Mm-hmm.
in the long run and like the centralization, all that kind of stuff. And like they reached out to the central bank a few days later, so I'm fairly sure it was like a Bitcoin person, and they were just like, okay, this is what your employee is doing, stop them in some way or fire them, whatever. So
You
yeah,
know what's
fairly
crazy
sure.
about that? Uh, so, well, first of all, I've received death threats before from the Monero community way back in the day. We're not nearly as bad today, but a friend of mine, Justin Bonds, who is also Dutch,
Yeah.
coincidentally, maybe there's something about Dutch logic and reasoning that infuriates people sometimes, but
Yeah, yeah.
he actually got death. He got threats to his company from the Cardano community when he posted a critique online, and they called up his company to try to get him fired. And he said, "Well, little did they know that I own the company,
I was
so it
gonna
just
say,
weren't going
yeah,
to
he's the
work.
owner.
It doesn't go to work." But yeah, so you got these threats. Was there any fallout from those threats to the employment?
No, so the Dutch central bank was surprisingly chill about it. They
Mm-hmm.
got it, like they sent it to our compliance department, and then they reached out to me, to the compliance department, and just showed whatever was sent to them. And they're like, "We're not going to do anything with this, but just be aware there are like people gunning for you." And they're like, "As long as you don't post this stuff as the opinion of the Dutch central bank, we're
Mm-hmm.
totally fine. Like this is a good way to discuss and like get to know more." So they were honestly super chill about it, which like they were more chill about it than.
Logical and reasonable, huh?
Yeah, yeah, they were quite reasonable about it. So yeah, there was no real fallout in that sense, just me being a bit more cautious. The weeks after I stopped posting so much just because like obviously people are keyboard warriors, but still it's a bit disconcerting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it did stop me a little bit, and then I was like, okay, fuck it. Like, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this. Sorry.
Absolutely.
Uh, and then I was like, okay, let's just go with it. It's gonna be fine. And then I started back up. But yeah, so no real fallout to be honest. Nothing bad.
Yeah. So before we go on to like what you did after that, first of all, how does working at a Dutch central bank or any central bank, how does that kind of square with being in crypto? Like, did it was there a little bit of a disconnect between your personal your professional life and in your personal opinions? Was it in some way that being that close to the machine made you more into crypto?
Yeah, it was a super interesting sort of dichotomy, I guess you call it,
Of course.
because I was into crypto before I ever joined the central bank, and I'm fascinated with financial systems and with
Mm-hmm.
monetary history, monetary theory. So it was a great place to go and work, really. And I did this young professional program where you do like different roles within the central bank. So you do like
Mm-hmm.
3 roles in 2 years. So I saw financial markets, how insurance works, and then I started supervising banks, mostly
Mm-hmm.
fintech banks. So that was super interesting just because you kind of see the other side. And at the same time, supervising banks, I feel like as long as we don't have everything running on crypto yet, it's a sort of valuable thing, right? You want people to be able to, be safe with their money. Same within crypto, pretty much like you don't want there to be scams, you don't want people to lose their money. Um, so that side was super interesting to me, and honestly I learned tons of stuff just because within the crypto community people know a lot about monetary stuff, but yeah, within the central bank unsurprisingly people do as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a great learning opportunity in that sense, but I was always the crypto guy within the central bank,
Yeah.
because I would always argue like the most basic tenets in central banking are like
Mm-hmm.
deflation is bad, we need inflation. And I would always be like, yes, but maybe no. Like maybe that is not the case. Uh, so in the end, they turns out the central bank was leading this international working group, which was supposed to set standards for crypto policy mostly, and they needed someone who knew a lot about crypto. And obviously, I was known as the crypto guy, so they came to me and they asked me, "Do you want to like actually work on crypto from within the central bank?" And at first, I was like, yeah, like there's no point, right? These are two different worlds. This is not going to work. But I was told I would have a lot of freedom. Just you can advise people on what we should do. We can set the policy, whatever. So it was super interesting because I got to talk to just the board of directors, a lot of very high up people in our bank, pretty much constantly trying to explain crypto, trying to sort of make the policy less bad, at least in the sense, or try to influence it anyway. In the end, I didn't last very long in that role, the crypto role, just because the difference was too big, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would literally be arguing all day, every day with everyone within the central
Mm-hmm.
bank, which is fine. But then at one point, I would be explaining stuff and I would be explaining that there are pros and cons to crypto because, like, obviously there are scams in crypto. Meme coins might not be the best thing that's ever happened for many people.
Of
So
course.
I would explain those cons. I would also explain like for remittances, it's fantastic. People can opt out of inflation in all these countries. And then it would be like, those pros, that's very nice, but could you go a bit deeper into those cons? And then like
Mm-hmm.
at one point it was just like, I'm not doing enough good here. Like I can do more
Mm-hmm.
good from outside the system than within. So then I decided to quit the central bank, um, and yeah, haven't regretted the decision. It's been a good decision.
Yeah. Well, one final note on that kind of thing. You're not the first or the second or the third person I've heard of who's a big crypto guy who's working in a central bank somewhere. It's
Yeah,
not. It sounds like whoa. Like I guess someone who doesn't think about it too much sounds like crazy. Like wow, we found like the trader from within. We got our whatever. But
yeah, yeah,
it's not that uncommon. I think maybe it's when you get that deep into financial systems and then your curiosity goes to other places. How would you not be interested in the newest that the world has to offer on financial systems?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And for me, it was more of the reverse as well. So I came into the central bank as a crypto enthusiast, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I learned about monetary stuff from the central bank and then it's like I was always a crypto enthusiast, just learned more from within the central bank. Because to be
Mm-hmm.
honest, we have super knowledgeable people within the crypto communities about monetary policy, inflation, all those topics. But just obviously the like directors of a central bank have way more history in this space than we do. I don't think their ideas are always correct or their arguments are correct, but it's super interesting at least to hear the arguments and to be able to discuss about this stuff with people who have like 30 years experience building a monetary system. So yeah, it was super interesting at least to me.
Yeah, for sure. And so you decided to leave because there was nothing more there. And where did you kind of go after that?
So right after I traveled first for a while because I'm like, okay, the few months I did the crypto policy role were pretty intense to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So afterwards I just decided to travel for a bit, and then I consulted for a bit on crypto related topics. this is also why I still stayed anonymous at the time. Like what you mentioned with Justin, I was kind of
Mm-hmm.
afraid that would happen to me as well, where people wouldn't reach out to me, but like to potential clients or like post online, like this Milan guy, whatever. Uh, so I did a bit of that, and then I started learning how to program using
Mm-hmm.
LLMs, ChatGPT
Nice.
3.5 at the time. So I was like, okay, cool, this is fun to play around with. And then kind of discovered many people didn't really have good access to it just because they were from a country that didn't allow it, or
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't spend $20 on a subscription, that kind of stuff. So I decided if I'm learning this, I might as well try and build something fun, small, so that people can access it as well. And that finally grew into NanoGPT, which is
Mm-hmm.
like what I'm full time working on nowadays.
Nice. So, first, what is NanoGPT in kind of a nutshell?
Right. So, in a nutshell, it's allowing anyone from anywhere to access all of the top LLMs. So,
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, also a bunch of uncensored and open source ones. So, allowing anyone to access all of those without needing a subscription. So, you can just
Mm-hmm.
pay per use, like 1 cent per prompt, sometimes even less, and without needing to give up all your personal information. So if you
Mm-hmm.
use ChatGPT or Claude, usually you make an account, and they already know quite a bit about you. They can link your prompts to like your name, your IP, your credit card, whatever. We don't require people to even create an account. You can just start using it right away. We don't store any prompts or any conversations. All of it is only local on people's devices. If they
Mm-hmm.
clear it, it's gone. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, so it's sort of trying to give everyone access to all of the top AIs through crypto, at least initially just through crypto,
Mm-hmm.
while also safeguarding people's privacy. Like, as you might understand, I value privacy a bit more maybe than the average person after this experience, pretty much. So we try to do whatever we can to ensure privacy.
Yeah. So, how does it work as far as from your end? Like, how do you get the access to then resell it? You just have accounts at all these places, and then sort of like sublet, sort of like little pieces, like loan out seconds or prompts worth automatically when they pay.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah. So we have, I'm not sure how many it is exactly now, but like say 17-ish providers, different ones. So for every model, we query a different provider
Mm-hmm.
with like the prompt, and then to that provider, they just see a ton of different requests come in, all from the same source. So essentially, it's as if I'm doing 1,000 requests, and they don't know if it's actually me or the person next to me. There's nothing to link all of the different conversations together
Mm-hmm.
except for it's coming from us. Like we don't pass on any IP or identifying information. Also because we just don't have it. Like if we don't have your identifying information, we're not going to pass it
Yeah.
on. But yeah, so it's kind of like it's we're a middleman in some ways where you don't have to give up your privacy um, to the endpoint pretty much. So if you
Mm-hmm.
use ChatGPT on our service, we still need to essentially send the prompt to OpenAI because there's
Mm-hmm.
no other way to get a response, and they could still store the prompt in their like database. We
Yeah.
have sort of every privacy setting set to the max for every provider that we can, and like request deletion, that kind of stuff, but they can still store it. But then
Mm-hmm.
at least they cannot link it to all your other prompts, to your IP, to your credit card details, to your personal information, pretty much.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you put it into the prompt. If you go like, "Hello, I'm Joel. I want to know," then yeah, they're gonna know.
Yes.
But yeah, it's at least better privacy than you would get with like traditional usage.
Yes. Or like how to bury a body close to this exact address in this country.
Yes.
It's like, oh well, we can figure something's going on there, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's kind of akin to like a global anonymity set where you could everyone you can see what's going on, but you can't. It could be any of the users doing it. You can't just
Yeah.
say that's that one person.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's already also a lot better than just with ChatGPT, for example. I think the default is that they do store all of your data. I don't know if the default also is that they train on it nowadays, but we've like our decision is just if we don't actually even store the prompts, then we can never sort of you can make
Mm-hmm.
a nice promise, right? Saying we will never use your data, we will never resell your data. But then why are you even storing it? We just don't want to store it in the first place so that we can just we cannot use it because we don't have it, which I think is a much
Mm-hmm.
cleaner way to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, have you done any such as like more creative AI services, like say Midjourney or like Runway or some of those video services, or is it still mostly like text prompt kind of things right now?
So we have text and images.
Mm-hmm.
Images is quite funny. Midjourney is the only one we don't have. So we have Flux, Ideogram, Stable Diffusion,
Mm.
Dolly, all those providers. But Midjourney is the only one that doesn't allow people to use their service outside of their own ecosystem.
Interesting.
So yeah, so there have been services that implemented Midjourney and they got sued. They
Wow.
essentially were told to take it down as quickly as possible. They're not open source, so we cannot run them ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, to be honest, Flux Pro, the newest version, which is Pro V 1.1, is honestly better than Midjourney. And I'm not saying that because we don't have Midjourney, but if you check like the independent sort of comparison websites, like Image Arena, I'm not sure what the
Mm-hmm.
actual name is. Flux actually scores higher than Midjourney nowadays. So yeah, but no, not Flux, or sorry, not Midjourney. Everything else we have. I think we have like 30 to 40 text models nowadays that you can use. So like the big ones, but also storytelling and role play ones, which are very
Mm-hmm.
popular, funnily enough. Uncensored ones,
Of course.
super cheap ones, and then for images we also have the big ones, also uncensored if you want to use it that way. Like 18 plus stuff can be generated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then video, for example, we're planning to add, but it's a bit difficult to get the UX to work well because it takes quite a while to generate a video. So we're trying to figure
Mm.
out how to actually, yeah, how to implement it well enough. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
definitely coming as well.
Yeah, it would be very interesting to see people start to use things like make like feature length movie type things with AI, which people are already doing, but to do
Yeah,
all that completely anonymously using crypto without
yeah,
having to actually run any of their own instances of anything. That would be very
yeah.
interesting.
I think so too. So what we see now, for example, is some people use it for storytelling slash role play stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then they like our service because you can do the role play in there, and then you can switch to image and generate an image to go with the role play thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then they switch back to text, and so that's already quite funny to see. And then I think if we add video, that's like a whole next level again. So yeah, we really do want to add video, but there's like as always tons of stuff we want to add and limited time to do so. So yeah, but it is coming. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting also to think. I'm sure that there could be a good market for something like this, because, like, for example, myself, I've been living on crypto forever, and also like my business, all on crypto. I don't have business bank accounts either, and so
Yeah.
whenever I have to do things like sign up for Midjourney or things like that, it's always I have to go through some card, some like
Mm,
reloadable card thing or something like that, which is it's fine, but it's still a step that not everyone necessarily has. And
yeah.
then also a lot of these services, like I have signed up for some services, bought subscriptions that I like later kind of regretted because I didn't use them as much as I thought I would. And there's a few I
Yeah.
want to try. Like I have done like free trial things of like AI voiceover things when I needed
Oh
to,
yeah.
and they were fine, but I didn't have a need for them because I could most like videos I could do my own voiceover for, but
Yeah.
these last few weeks I've been sick, and so my voice hasn't been perfect. So there's some videos I'm waiting to get done that I just
Ah.
haven't done the voiceover for, and it's like, oh, this might be a nice thing to do, but I would never pay to sign up. But there's another friend of mine who runs a Hollywood animation studio and has pretty significant stuff, and is now trying to be like live completely like KYC free, all on crypto, all this kind of
Mm,
stuff. And so it's just like then the access to all those tools or things for creators and things like that is can be a little bit difficult. And
yeah.
so yeah, it could be a good fit. Now you
Yeah.
mentioned
Yeah.
about the privacy, right? Despite good privacy, do you have any kinds of ideas about who your users are, as far as like what kinds of people they are, where they are in the world, things like that? Like maybe they volunteered some information in testimonials or things like that. Do you have any idea kind of what kinds of people are using the service?
Yeah. So we have a lot of testimonials just on Reddit and Twitter. just because whenever we post about stuff, people reply,
Mm-hmm.
which is super nice to see. I was collecting some of them 2 days ago, and it's like it warms your heart. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, people actually like our service. That's super nice. But we have quite some people who reach out to us to just say thank you, which is very nice,
Mm-hmm.
and then they explain a bit about how they used it. So I've used this example a few times now. So for some people, it will be like, oh, again. But we had this one guy who was either from Kenya or Nigeria who thanked me because he could solve a medical issue with our service. Where I was like, I'm not sure, like, if you want to be using this for medical stuff. And he was like, well,
Mm-hmm.
my alternative is like a shaman in this village.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and he had just deposited, like, I think it was literally like 10 cents of Nano to use this. And then
Mm-hmm.
he could just ask this question, and it's like, okay, great. Uh, we had other people who used it to write a thesis and who got a very good grade for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um a lot of people just use it for image generation. Obviously, we had someone who generated like coloring pages of a specific dinosaur for his kid.
Mm-hmm.
What else do we have? Honestly, it's a ton of different usage. Many people use it for coding, obviously,
Of
coding,
course.
programming. That's what I use it for a lot
Mm-hmm.
myself. And yeah, it's a lot of different sort of use cases. Some people have implemented our API into their stuff, like into a chatbot or something,
Mm-hmm.
which is also really cool to see. Um, it's tons of different stuff at this point, really. It's also because we have a lot of different models, right? So some are better at math, for example, and then people use it for their math homework.
Mm-hmm.
Some are better at giving, I don't know, marketing advice or something. So yeah, there's a lot of very cool usage of it. I think the usage I like most is the examples like people in Kenya, Nigeria,
Mm-hmm.
because that is where crypto shines to me. It's also kind of why we started this because
At
like
least I think so.
you're
it's
yeah, no,
it's not
true.
as
Like
universally understood anymore.
no, no, but like you understand this obviously because you
Mm-hmm.
live like off of the banking system, but many people don't have the choice even whether they want to live on or off the banking system. So then I think it's super cool that someone in Kenya can. We also have like an earn page on our website where people can earn a little bit of crypto through like different services. And then they can just earn like $1 or 10 cents or whatever and use it without ever having to like figure out how to get a bank account or like go through KYC stuff or so I think that that kind of usage I find super cool, and that makes me happier than one person spending $100 on our service. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I like all the sort of smaller users, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. For example, I'm a user of the Hive blockchain as well, which is allows you. It's kind of the successor to Steam, if you remember
Mhm.
Steam from back in the day,
Yeah,
and a lot of social postings you can earn from things like that. And I always find there's a ton of international communities, especially in the developing world, because people need ways of earning,
yeah,
and they're much more willing to spend after that. And I can easily see, especially the world is such a huge place and there's so much talent all over the world, but what floats to the top is just what ends up being in these sort of Western ecosystems a lot of times.
yeah,
People who have all the opportunity to get things going, and talent in other countries sometimes doesn't have the opportunity to break through in the same way. But at the
yeah,
same time, I can imagine easily how you could get some very young person in some country who had just this an electronic device of some kind and passionate curiosity, and then just starts learning how to code from scratch, not just from manuals and things there, but is able to use AI supported, LLM supported things to use, and then earns crypto because they're both too in a different part of the world, but also too young to use the banking system, and then they're
yeah,
able to use that to pay for that, and then pay for other things, live on crypto, and kind of grow that. And it could be an interesting combination for like a talent incubator, and
hmm
kind of interesting. Even though in the developed world, there's a couple of people I know. One of them who's a good friend of mine who got started in crypto, basically doing one of them's a was a kind of like a white hat hacker a little bit, turned into a developer, and the other one was a security expert who hacked hardware wallets kind of for fun, and they're both like 15 or 16 years old, right? And at that point they can't really earn money because they don't have a bank account, they can't do any of that,
yeah,
but they can earn crypto and they
yeah,
can spend it. And I've heard of another young gentleman in the UK who was like 12 or something and sold a bunch of NFTs made like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth on that, and then just now what do you do with it? You can't turn it into money because you're a
Oh
child,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, but crypto doesn't discriminate.
No, exactly. Yeah, I think that kind of usage is really cool, right? I think I really appreciate what you do in this because
Mm-hmm.
you actually live on crypto and are sort of an example of this for many people, I think. It's the same with Vini, who you probably know.
Yeah,
Um,
like Vinny too.
like Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think that is what we actually need more of, right? Because right now, what it still is for many services, even services like ours, what they do is they take crypto payments, but then it gets converted to fiat. And
Mm-hmm.
then if someone wants to pay for stuff on their service, first people convert from an exchange to get some crypto and then they
Mm-hmm.
pay. And it's like what we ideally want is more of a circular ecosystem. And that's why we have the earn page, right? So that we really want to build the circular ecosystem. And obviously, we're enthusiastic about Nano, but on the earn page, we just add whatever ways you can earn any crypto that's
Mm-hmm.
supported on our website. So, like, if there are good ways to earn Dash, like, I would love to hear, just because then we can add
Mm-hmm.
them. People have more options to earn like little bits of money, and that way we don't have to ever offboard into traditional systems. Um,
Yeah.
and just to be clear, we hold our treasury, our reserves are in
Mm-hmm.
crypto as well in Nano. So we're not one of the businesses where it's like you pay and then we just convert into dollars. We actually believe in it for the long term as well as a store of
Mm-hmm.
value. So we try to be as crypto native as possible, pretty much.
Yeah. It's so we're talking about all these use cases. It sounds like, I mean, it's great high-minded things that get people passionate and about helping the world grow and everything like that. But as far as like business sense, like is there actually, according to what you see, like a big target market, and does it really produce enough revenue at this point to be sustainable long term?
Yeah. So for just Nano, it wasn't. Sadly, we would like to say it would be
Mm-hmm.
enough to just support Nano, but not enough people hold Nano and use it. It was more than we had expected, to be honest. Like we
Mm-hmm.
got a lot of usage and revenue just from Nano, but there's a reason we're adding other crypto as well, right? And we've actually added, like I told you, I think before we started
Mm-hmm.
this, we added Dash just because we want to support as many different cryptos as possible so that anyone can easily use it. But we also added credit cards like a week
Mm-hmm.
ago, just because a lot of people, frankly, don't have crypto yet. And then they're used to credit cards, right? And we kind of also want to cater to that just because there is obviously money in it. Um, and we kind of think that will help crypto as well in a way because we accept credit cards, but we have a very big 5% discount banner on Nano. So we're
Mm-hmm.
hoping people will pay with their credit cards, but at least sometimes be curious, like, why are they offering me a discount in this? And like, that would be nice to have. And
Yeah.
then if people click that, we show like, why do we offer a discount in Nano? Especially, and like essentially explain credit cards have super high fees for us, and like Nano or crypto more broadly has a lot of
Mm-hmm.
advantages. So we'd love for you to check it out, and like here's how you can get started, that kind of stuff. So we're hoping that we can maybe optimistically, maybe, but like ease some people into at least checking out crypto, and yeah,
Yeah,
help
for
that way.
sure. There are some. It's an interesting thing that I didn't really see. I didn't really know existed, but there's a very strong privacy community in the fiat world. And so for me, if I'm using crypto, one of the biggest things is my wallets are my business, and I don't have to tell anyone about them. Right? I can
Yeah.
transact privately. I don't have to prove an ID to open a wallet or anything. But for example, there's a privacy service called, I believe it's privacy.com, which allows people to link their bank account to it, and then they could generate single use anonymous like credit cards for online
Okay.
payments, so that their name and their card number never gets attached to any of their purchases, even though of course
Yeah.
there's a company that still knows their identity and everything. Their bank kind of sees them doing this stuff. It's interesting that like I can imagine someone like that, using that service on NanoGPT to be able to then use these LLMs completely anonymously, but never
Yeah.
have any exposure to crypto at all, just purely for the privacy.
Yeah, yeah, could definitely be. Realistically, whatever value people get out of our website, like I'm happy if people get value out of it. I do think it will help crypto in the long term, even if people like are not originally crypto users and come to our
Mm-hmm.
website. But yeah, it's for people who value their privacy in general. Like I'm happy if we can help them as well, because there are many countries where you don't want any sort of central entity storing your information, right? Like if
Mm-hmm.
you live in Russia and OpenAI just decides to give up your data to the Russian government, or if you live in the US and Trump gets elected and you were a
Mm-hmm.
heavy Kamala supporter, I'm pretty sure there are some people who were like, okay, I don't want that to be sort of known anywhere, or vice versa, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think people largely undervalue privacy. I'd like to see it valued a bit more. Uh, yeah, and
And
maybe we can help.
yeah, I definitely agree with that. And just as a side note, because you mentioned like the U.S. election, over the last, I think for the last few months at least, Midjourney has been blocking all prompts related to the election because they
Oh
just
yeah,
don't. It's like they've made an internal decision that it's too toxic or too whatever to make these kinds of prompts. And I've had many times, 'cause I use that for all my thumbnails and things, um,
ah,
especially when I do like a live show every week, and it's just like whatever the news topic is, I can't spend like, especially if like the news headlines, I aggregate them the day before because they're fresh, and I want to do a
yeah,
show on that. I can't spend a long time making a graphic for it, so I just put in some basic prompt in Midjourney, maybe touch it up a little bit, and then add like a crypto logo if I need to, and then there you go, just very quick.
yeah.
And so I couldn't do that with Midjourney, and there was a lot of political figures who show up in a crypto context. Like Trump goes all
Yeah,
in on Bitcoin. I just have a picture go with like a coin or something, and it
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
do it for me. So for a while, I
Uh,
had to use Venice, which is Eric
oh yeah, yeah,
Voorhees' AI thing, and
yeah.
I used the free part, and the quality is not nearly as good as Midjourney. And then I was
No.
thinking, maybe I should pay for this because they do accept crypto. The problem is they accept crypto through like Coinbase Commerce or something like that
Yes.
that doesn't really take real crypto and like doesn't take any of the ones that I have and like. So I never paid
Yeah,
for that. For me, it's kind of like they just do fiat. But the point
yeah,
is
yeah.
just the electoral things. It's not like, oh, you don't want to do something spicy or like,
No, no. It's
it's
just
just
yeah,
basic. Like I should have the right to talk about current events in a very
yeah,
respectful, neutral way. Not even
yeah.
opinionated. Just talk that they exist, and images are part of that. Just represent that, and especially with like stock photos and stuff like that. What I love about AI is I don't have to deal with that or care about rights to images. I
No.
just get to like not even think about it, put up an image. There you go. And it's very
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's very liberating and definitely I'll definitely the election's almost over, and so I doubt I'm going to have to do thumbnails again about that. But if I do, or if they do any other kind of weird restrictions, I'm definitely going to look up. I would definitely going to try at least try image generation through NanoGPT to see what I
Yeah,
can do.
I was gonna say, so if you go into settings, you can turn off all censoring.
Mm-hmm.
So that allows people to do like not suitable for work stuff, but also just these kinds of images that would normally be censored. And
Mm-hmm.
then like there's a ton of different models. I'm not sure which one is best at this kind of generation, but
Mm-hmm.
like in general, Flux Pro is very good. Flux Realism is very good. The model that you were using on Venice is actually one of our worst models,
Mm-hmm.
one of the cheaper ones. I think it's Playground V2.5 they mostly use. We also have that one. It's just not what I would call the best.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, give it a try sometime. I mean, we accept Dash now, so you
Mm-hmm.
could deposit literally 10 cents and try it out and see
Yeah,
see
for
how you
sure.
go.
And I have to say, as far as like privacy services, there are a few really good ones that are not at all related to the LLM world. There, I think Text Verified and Juicy SMS are two services I've used many times before because I use privacy services. I have a de-googled phone, Graphene OS phone. I don't
Mm,
I don't even know my own phone number on the mobile because I use VoIP numbers instead to protect my device from getting SIM swapped or anything, for example.
yeah, yeah,
And and sometimes you have to sign up for like Uber or something, and they want a SMS verification. And these services will, you could pay 10, 20 cents in crypto. And I don't know if they
smart.
take fiat at all, but they do. I do know they take crypto, which works really well for that. And then you just get a single use real SMS number for a verification code to get you in. And it's just
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
perfect use case for crypto. You just throw a very small like a micropayment. I don't know if it qualifies as a micropayment, but close enough of small
Yeah,
payment,
yeah,
and
small
you can just
payment.
do
Yeah.
that. And there's a lot of that in the privacy space as well. And so I think I'm definitely, and as I might have mentioned, I'm in the process of writing an article right now about how to live on crypto privately, specifically
Okay.
on this. And I think I'll probably have to add a NanoGPT message mention in because that's an important service that a lot of people use that there isn't a really good privacy focused way of getting in there.
Yeah, I was actually, so we were writing up like a privacy policy and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I threw it into I think I used Claude to compare it with like
Mm-hmm.
Venice's privacy policy. I think
Mm-hmm.
we actually offer better privacy than they do, but they are more sort of targeting the privacy component. Obviously, Eric is like a Monero person as well, so I guess he has that background. Monero we are adding soon as well, so then people can use a fully anonymous crypto for this service as well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, I think if there are ways we can improve our privacy further, we will definitely do so. But I think it is already, yeah, a very good option for many people.
Yeah, for sure. So we're talking about all this good stuff, all the stuff that I personally find very interesting. Crypto sovereignty, all the freedom, privacy, but also the access for the needy around the world, like
Hmm.
universal access. It's not just for the rich; it's for everyone.
Yeah.
All the kind of stuff that we like. Now, cryptocurrency was founded with certain universal access principles, I guess, and definitely a lot of these principles baked into it. And it sounds like we both came in both the same year. We got into crypto, but also the same sort of principles. How do you see the way the space has gone? What's your holistic view of where the space is today versus when you started? How do you see the picture today?
Yeah. So I would say I was expecting Bitcoin to move more or just stay more towards
Mm-hmm.
catering to transactions and actual usage rather than becoming digital gold and a store of value. I can see the arguments for store of value, but I thought it would have been more of a payment thing. And I also think it was our best chance of a
Mm-hmm.
payment thing. Like the battle is way harder now for another crypto that actually can do payments to take over from Bitcoin. Uh, so the way I see the space today is it is way too much speculation, way too much gambling, to be honest. It is way too focused on let's pump our bags regardless of fundamentals, regardless of what the actual underlying issues are. I think we need to take more time to look into is this going to work in the long run? Like, yes, it sounds nice to call something a store of value, and Bitcoin has gone up in price. What is the actual reason we have for thinking it will keep going up in price?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do we think about the long term security budget? What do we think about how it stays decentralized in the long term? How are we going to get people to actually transact on it? Like, I don't know. I feel like it's strayed quite far from the original promises, and not all crypto, obviously. I mean, you're enthusiastic about Dash. Like, Dash has a clear focus, right? You have instant pay, whatever. People can actually use it. Same is true for Nano. Same is true for Monero, Bitcoin Cash. I much prefer those sort of communities over Bitcoin. Um, which I guess makes sense, right?
Of
No one would
course.
expect me to say I'm the biggest fan of Bitcoin, but I feel like we need more of that, and we need to somehow do a better job of explaining why people should care about decentralization, why people should care about what happens in the long run, instead of just being in this bubble where everything is a shitcoin and like look at this price graph where you can see that Bitcoin has gone up and your shitcoin has gone down. Like there's no value in that, right? Like that's not how we get to broad adoption. And like someone in Kenya and Nigeria is not going to care that Bitcoin went up in price if they're
Mm-hmm.
unable to literally move it. Like the fee is higher than what they can probably afford. um, so I think that's just stupid. I think we need to focus more on actual usability. um, yeah.
Yeah, one thing we've definitely seen, um, there was for the longest time, and still is a little bit, this kind of do not compete clause with Bitcoin that's in people's kind of internal, it's unspoken rule, where even when there was a few people who actively opposed it, that most of those were Bitcoin Cash people, I would say
Hmm. Yeah.
at the time of the block size war, and they were reviled almost in the crypto space. Even people who
Yeah.
kind of agreed with them kind of viewed them as troublemakers to a certain extent. And it seems like everyone either went along with store of value or went sideways. They went a different way,
Yeah.
which is kind of the Ethereum community, which is very ironic that Ethereum is so hated by Bitcoin maximalists today because it was almost conciliatory in that, like, no, 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 we won't compete with you. We'll do something different. And
Yeah. Yeah.
the space seems to have followed the sideways pivot very much, where everything that is big and successful is not monetary directly. It's all
Yeah.
programmability, it's all NFTs, it's all DeFi, and it's all kinds of different financial instruments, tokens, digital property, games, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And money is just Bitcoin. And then the people who are focused on money and payments are just in purgatory right now. They're kind of like
Yeah.
hanging around in this club of like struggling to break free. So first of all, the payments use case and all that stuff that we like, even though it's a much smaller percentage of the crypto space, have you seen the in absolute numbers any kind of encouraging growth?
So NanoGPT has honestly been growing pretty quick. So we have like no complaints there.
Yeah, of course.
It's growing a lot quicker than we'd expected beforehand as well, to be honest. We're actually considering starting like next month to start releasing monthly figures on the distribution of the different crypto. So we can see how much was paid in Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, Nano, Dash. Um, because I think that will be interesting to see. Like BitPay does it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we see more usage. So for us, this is really weird, right? Because Nano has been decreasing in price or in
Mm-hmm.
price relative to Bitcoin, which to us is very weird because all we see is like more usage of it. We know that we're sort of going to be accumulating a lot more because we convert everything into Nano. So there, it feels like it's a big sort of mystery to us why it keeps going down. In terms of other chains, I don't follow them as closely. I was talking to Litecoin Underground yesterday
Oh
or two
yeah,
days ago,
good man.
and yeah, yeah, very very nice guy as well. Uh, and Litecoin is used a lot, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not my favorite chain, but it is used quite a lot, and
Yeah.
they've seen increasing usage as well. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel I feel like it's kind of coming a bit, but it's not going quick enough, I think. Um, because
Yeah.
there just are not enough places to earn it and spend it, realistically speaking. Like I am very enthusiastic about Nano, as you know, but one of the issues that we have is right. You get some Nano. Now, what do you do with it?
Mm-hmm.
Which we try to partly solve, but we need to make it easier to spend it on more different stuff, to earn it in different ways. Um, so yeah, I think we're getting there. We're working towards it, but it's not big enough yet, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a good Litecoin's a great example too because I would consider Litecoin to currently be the most successful digital cash project right now as far as like raw transaction numbers are in the hundreds of
Yeah.
thousands a day. If you look at payment processor metrics, whether it's BitPay, whether it's Bitrefill, whether it's CoinGate, all these ones who publish things publicly, Litecoin is always a big chunk of those.
Yeah.
And the other part of that data, though, is the biggest growth in the payment space is undeniably stablecoins and
Hmm.
mostly centralized stablecoins, right? Like Tether and USDC are the two big ones. It's really hard for anything else to get in there. And
Yeah.
a lot of times, you depending on which geographical market is more important, you will find these coins on cheap chains specifically being
Hmm.
kind of having like the uh, the leader, of course, is Tether on Tron, and I have to say, like as I tell a lot of people, I paid a PR invoice this year, and it was a outfit out of Georgia, the country of Georgia, and it was in Tether on Tron. That's what they wanted, and so I used Tether on Tron this year for a work related thing, right? Do you think that maybe the digital cash with its own scarce supply and right now volatile token is kind of has run its course, had its shot with Bitcoin, but it's not. But now that's over. It's not going to happen again, and that it will be only stable coins and networks that facilitate stable coins that will achieve mass payment adoption. Do you think that at all?
Okay, so I'll start with the stablecoin side. I think stablecoins are a great thing for many people just
Mm-hmm.
because it gives them the option to easily access USD when they want to, right? I'm all for that free choice. I think in the long run, it's not what is going to win. just because stablecoins are still inflationary, they are still centralized, and there is going to be a point when one of these, like either the inflation or the centralized aspect, is going to bite people in the ass, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So far, it hasn't, so it can keep growing, but like Tether will do something weird, exit scam, whatever. Uh,
Wow.
it turns out
Not
that,
even,
yeah,
right?
like yeah,
Right.
or like I don't know, Circle starts blocking transactions from countries in which the US doesn't want them to do transactions. The US starts entering higher inflation. I think all of those are possible, and I think that's why stablecoins are not the final form. That's why I'm actually very optimistic on fixed supply crypto or like decentralized crypto. And I think Bitcoin obviously is the most valuable thing in the crypto space. So there is demand for a decentralized store of value with relatively fixed supply in Bitcoin's case. I just think Bitcoin would be so much bigger if there was a clear future security, like game theory, pretty much, you can call it.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it was clear it would stay secure in the long term, and if people could actually use it. Like imagine you had a Bitcoin that people could actually transact with, then I don't think stablecoins would have gotten so big because people would have less need to move on to stablecoins. You could stay in what is essentially an appreciating asset relative to stablecoins and just use it to pay for your stuff. So I
Mm-hmm.
think stablecoins are great for many people. I understand why people use them, but I see them as an in-between step to the final step of a crypto standard where everyone wants to be both holding crypto, using crypto, and you as a merchant want to be accepting crypto because
Mm-hmm.
if we accept stablecoins, we're still going to want to convert them into nano, frankly, because we think that is fundamentally a better store of value than USDC or USDT is. So to me, they are, yeah, the in between step on the road to full decentralized crypto.
Yeah. Do you think there's a possibility that some sort of a decentralized stablecoin that's not pegged to the dollar specifically or any fiat currency, but maybe some asset like, say, gold, or maybe a basket of crypto assets like an index of like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and then a few other the big players, that something like that would become the next kind of like payment thing as a way of like of escaping the volatility of individual scarce assets? Or do you think that it will be kind of like a digital version of the world today, where you have hundreds of different currencies by different countries all over the world, but instead of geographically locked, it's kind of like communities have their own fluctuating value against
Mm.
each other, at least currency.
The decentralized stablecoin, I find hard to imagine how it would actually work
Mm-hmm.
in practice. I just find that really difficult.
Yeah.
Um, I also think it's become a harder sell, obviously, after Luna. I
Mm-hmm.
think I don't know, maybe that works out. I just find it difficult to imagine how. And I would still think that an actually decentralized currency with like fixed supply or relatively fixed supply would in the long run be better than such a stable coin. Stable coins, it's always the question, right, of stable relative to what? If you do it relative to gold, it's like, okay, but then we are relying on gold keeping a relatively stable value. And what is the reason for that, right? Maybe if we have something that's actually digital gold that you can use in an easier way, then that will lead to a decrease in the price of gold. And then you're stuck with your stablecoin pegged to gold, which is decreasing in value. Um, so I'm not sure I see that as a future in terms of every country or community having their own crypto or their own fluctuating currency. I think that could happen, but at the same time, I would wonder if we had, for example, a fluctuating currency of ourselves here. I would be like, okay, what is the inflation rate of this
Mm-hmm.
specific currency? If it's, say, 5%, why am I holding this? Like, why am I not holding something that's actually stronger and that I can use not only in my own community, but everywhere in the world? And then I would prefer to hold my savings in that, like in the decentralized version, in say, like literally, I would hold Nano with fully fixed supply, swap into the local currency as needed, not suffer the debasement and inflation in the meantime. I think that makes more sense to me. Whether we get there in the next few years or even the next 5 or 10 years, I don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
in the long run, I just don't see how anything else really makes sense in terms of incentives for people to hold.
Yeah, that makes sense, I guess. Now, circling back to the whole central bank thing, it's been a very hot topic. Not so weirdly enough, not so much in crypto communities themselves, but in a lot of like pro freedom communities, the central bank digital currency or CBDC. And
Hmm.
I find in obviously in like pro liberty or libertarian style circles, you find that very frequently. But even in what I would call just straight up conservative circles, like half of the voting body of the US knows kind of what the CBDCs are conceptually, and there's many state governments in the U.S. that have already at least explored legislation to ban them. If not,
Hmm.
a couple of states have actually enacted such things. It's so there's a lot of an awareness about that this is a big issue, but there's very little real understanding. It's kind of like a boogeyman or like a cryptid
Yeah.
almost. It's like an animal everyone's scared of but doesn't understand anything about. So what do central banks think of CBDCs, and like what's their perspective? Are they really, is it kind of like, well, we're trying something new, we're going to try that? Is it like this is the plan, this is the only way we go forward? Is there like a lot of, at least from your perspective, from where you've been, a lot of like traction in there? And then also, what do you think of the actual prospects of them succeeding?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is there's a very big difference between central banks in how they think about this.
Mm-hmm.
Some are very enthusiastic about it. Some don't really see the point because it is quite difficult to explain to people sometimes why they should even want to have a central
Mm-hmm.
bank digital currency. So if you think about the Netherlands, for example, the banking system in the Netherlands just works really well. Like I can transfer to anyone, they get it within a few seconds. If you pay online, it's a very smooth experience. If they keep their money in the bank, they have the deposit guarantee scheme. So people are largely like, okay, so what is this central bank digital currency actually? Like, why should I care?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then the idea is also that there will be a maximum on how much you can hold in CBDC. So people are like, okay, but then why don't I just put it in my regular bank? So in some countries, people don't even really see the point, and therefore central banks, to an extent, also don't see the point. But there are obviously many countries in which central banks are enthusiastic about this. The positive spin on it is because it's an easy way to guarantee that people have access to public money. Like they don't need to go through a financial institution or like a commercial institution to access money.
Mm-hmm.
That's the positive spin on it. The negative spin is it's of course the ultimate like surveillance tool and the ultimate control tool that you could wish for. If you think like AML, KYC laws are bad now, imagine when the government or the central bank can literally see every transaction live because it's coming in via their central owned servers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then they'll say a lot of things about giving privacy and about how they'll ensure it can never be blocked, that kind of stuff. But to me, it's always like you build in the capability to do this from the start. Like you can say it's not going to be used. It's the same with the privacy argument earlier, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
storing your data. I would prefer there not to be an option to do this because there have been many countries where you probably trust the government in year X, and then 10
Mm-hmm.
years later, you're like, now I don't actually trust this government so much anymore, and I want to be able to move my money. And by that time, it might be too late. And with central bank digital currencies, that future comes very close, right? It's like you can
Mm-hmm.
easily block people from getting out of the system. Um, I'm personally not very fond of them. I think I think it's more of a tool for control than it is a good thing. Again, people should always have a free choice in what they want to use, and if it's something that people want to have, totally fine. I would not encourage people to use it too much.
Yeah,
Oh
absolutely.
yeah, and you were asking how the central banks think about it. I would find it hard to answer just because there's such a big difference between all
Mm-hmm.
central banks. Some countries really like the idea of the full control. Others are like surprisingly more privacy oriented than you would think. Some are still very much cash based, so they know it
Mm-hmm.
will be a hard sell to their population. So it's like a very big mix of opinions.
Yeah, I think that's something important you mentioned about the privacy policy example of like not having to trust people, and that that kind of reminds me of there's a crypto service staking service that has a for smaller holders they have a custodial staking option, but then they have non-custodial. They try to push people into the non-custodial things as much as they can, but in their
Yeah.
little like a FAQ about how you do this. It's like, why should you trust us? And it's like, well, this, that, all these reasons, and then the last reason says, and we're very nice Danish guys, and which I think is very nice, but it's just it's obviously like, true, but also sort of a joke to be like, okay, well, you should still try not to use the trusted part, but
Yes.
it is kind of funny how that is kind of like the trust mechanism of almost the entire banking system is, no, we're nice guy. Come on, we wouldn't do that to you. But it's like,
Yeah, you can
but you
trust us.
could. You absolutely
Yeah.
could.
Yeah. And this is a discussion I often had in the central bank as well, where they were like, "But we've done a good job at managing inflation, right? In the Netherlands, in the eurozone. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why would people distrust us and want to hold crypto?" And I'm like, "That's actually fair. Like you have done a pretty good job. First of all, Netherlands is not the only country in the world. The EU is not the only
Mm-hmm.
country. There are many countries where people do not trust their central bank to not debase them and inflate away their money. But even within the Netherlands, like I think people should at least have the choice of whether they want to hold your money or some other money.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not that you haven't done a good job so far. It's just that I prefer not to have to trust you to keep doing a good job. I prefer to have that control myself and not give it away,
Yeah.
which I think is just a very different mindset than what some people have.
Yeah, for sure. And like just keeping track of like the basics of the euro price. And I first like started. I don't remember what year the euro came out, but I was, I first used it probably in 2004 or something like that.
Mm,
And keeping track of the dollar conversion amount, it's been relatively similar the whole time, but there's a
yeah,
lot of dissatisfaction against the dollar right now because a few years ago, I remember the term inflation was like an economy nerd term,
yeah,
or libertarians, of course, knew what it was, but the average person on the street did not know what it meant. Now everyone knows what it means.
yes,
Everyone
yeah,
remembers basically a 40% or more increase in price since like 2000 or so, and everything's gone
yeah,
up. Everyone knows that. And so even the best fiats are not doing very well. And then of course
yeah,
growing up in Mexico, the peso is 7 pesos to the US dollar at the time. Now it's what, 20 something? And
yeah,
so versus the dollar, which is, again, we've already covered just now, it's not good.
yeah.
There's nothing in the long term that's good as a fiat thing. But of course,
No,
when you look at the time scale of that, from one year to the next, it's usually not that much. So when people spend, they're not really in a hurry to spend something like crypto. But as far as a long term store of value, they seem to care a little bit more. However, that has
yeah,
changed in the last few years when you had like a giant inflation spike over just 1 year or 2 years. So,
yeah, yeah.
do you think that we are going to hit sort of Argentina style, Lebanon style, then obviously Venezuela, Zimbabwe style, hyperinflationary events? Maybe Turkey is a good example now too.
Yeah.
Of Are we going to hit that much more on a global scale, and that will prompt a lot of people to look for scarce crypto assets, or do you think that maybe people will embrace crypto for other reasons? We won't have this like crypto anarchist wet dream of all these fiats hyperinflating and sending everyone into crypto.
Right, yeah. I would hope people embrace it for other reasons, just because, as you say, the crypto anarchist dream also comes with a lot of downsides, right? Like if you have
Mm-hmm.
hyperinflation in countries, people are not having a good time in general. Like that is not something I want to really happen.
Of course.
Whether I think it happens, I think there for the US, for example, it is getting a bit unsustainable at this point, I feel like. I also think that's the case for some European countries, but then again, I've thought, especially for European countries, I've thought that for a while, and it
Mm-hmm.
hasn't really happened so far. I mean, we've seen pretty high inflation, but not like the 50, 100% inflation. I do think, honestly, it happens eventually. And even without that happening, I think inflation is going to be structurally higher for many of those countries, which we've already seen sort of the last few years. So I think more and more people will notice the inflation eating away at them. I think that is sort of a push towards crypto, but I think the push will be the weakest in these developed countries, right? The
Of
push first
course.
comes in, as you say, Nigeria, Argentina, all those kinds of countries. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't bet on the dollar for like a 50-year. sort of run,
Yeah.
right? I would much prefer crypto there.
Yeah, and that is kind of a it's kind of an interesting dichotomy because when I've looked around for crypto adoption as far as on the whole, it's hard to get a firm metric, but crypto is
Yeah.
most important to US, Canada, Western Europe. And ironically, those are the places that probably need it the least as far as
Hmm.
alternatives because unfortunately there's the big need from the developed world, the developing world, but then the technological barriers, or more importantly, the knowledge barriers, just the
Yeah.
education barriers, seem to outweigh almost the need in a lot of places. But then, of course, you do see some grassroots efforts for crypto. So, on the whole, if you had to actually bet on it, like actually stake your whole net worth on this outcome, would you bet that it will be the developed world that starts using cryptocurrency in daily life, or the developing world that does it first?
Using in daily life, I honestly think developing world, because I think for the developed world, there will be more value or more money flowing into crypto from the developed world, I think, but
Yes.
not using it in daily life, just because the financial systems in developed countries are fairly good. So the marginal gain from crypto is a lot smaller. Whereas in the developing world, that sort of difference is way bigger. So I think if we can make it so that people can earn in crypto easier, that is also going to be more valuable for the developing world, because $1 paid to someone who only makes $5 a day is going to be bigger than to like someone in the developed world, right? So I think usage primarily would come from developing world. I think market cap essentially comes more from developed world.
Yeah, so interesting. That's probably something I would agree with that I never thought of in those terms before, where you have the VC money, the investment, a lot of the building, and then the money flows then to the developing world where they end up using it in real life, and then also some of the better like talent and coding and things like that might come from there as well, even though they're
Hmm.
supporting maybe Western run teams or companies or things like that. And maybe that's the way it starts to happen. And then when you start to see an evening out where now you start to have more capital in the developing world and more teams that start there. And so that's what they got. Like for example, a lot of the Dash developers are from the Russian speaking part of the world. And I know that, in fact, Russian is the second, by overwhelmingly the second most popular language. And those countries are of sources of installs of the wallet, which I have no idea where that specifically came from. But then also, you see Venezuela is the number one source by a mile for Dash Wallet downloads right
Mm,
now.
that's cool.
And yeah, you see a lot of these kinds of interesting metrics coming up about these things. And then I am a very big fan, of course, the Maya protocol. There's some very one of the better teams in crypto, and they're, as far as I understand, like 95% of the team is in Mexico, from Mexico, and it's
Okay.
a Mexican project, except that with one person from the Netherlands who works there for them. So it's kind of interesting.
Always got to have a Dutch person in there somewhere.
Of course, it's kind of an interesting mix, but it is kind of encouraging to see more projects ground up from other countries. And
Yeah.
from my understanding, Multiverse X, or used to be called Elrond or eGold or whatever name they're using today, right? One of the more innovative crypto projects today is, from my understanding, from Romania. And so
Okay.
you're starting to see maybe not the most developed countries in the world starting to give birth to these kinds of movements, and that is pretty encouraging.
Yeah, I think to an extent it's sort of geographical arbitrage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we already have this with remote work where you can work from anywhere and just be paid normally. And now with crypto, the sort of getting paid also becomes a lot easier. So if you live in a country where income is low, but you can work online and get paid in crypto, that's great,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes more sense for companies maybe to hire you than someone who lives in Los Angeles or New York because they're
Mm-hmm.
expensive. So I'd love to see more of that. And like nowadays, actually, I'm on Starlink now. like that stuff also makes it easier, right? If we can spread Starlink around the world, then it doesn't really matter where you are, you can have access. Obviously, Starlink is still pretty expensive, so it doesn't work for everyone. But I really like the idea of sort of equalizing access to internet, to these LLMs, to
Mm-hmm.
good financial infrastructure, um, and then that should help people have more opportunities. At least I would assume.
Yeah, that makes sense. This has been quite the fascinating conversation. Where would you direct people to want to follow you, other than obviously nano-gpt.com?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, nano-gpt.com, where we also accept Dash nowadays, in case people are interested in checking it out, is like the website. We also have a Twitter
Mm-hmm.
account, which is nanogpt.com, like
Mm-hmm.
nanogpt.com. If people want to be updated on what we do with NanoGPT. And then my personal Twitter account is Milan underscore De Reede, Dereede. Uh, I think if you type Milan, formerly Mira Hurley or something, you can
Mm-hmm.
probably also find me, just because I figured I would keep my name sort of clear to everyone. I think those are the best places to follow me and to check out NanoGPT. We also have a Discord, obviously, and people can reach out via email and whatever. But the Twitter is a good place to stay up to date.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, this has been a great chat, and thanks again for being on. And thanks everyone for watching. And I hope you guys all have a good one.